So.
It's so tricky.
Do you know what? That's brilliant, because I always think that we come in here, we read MCC regulations and planning requirements, and it all gets so complicated. We, at the end of the day, we're men and women. And men and women have been building.
We built
for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Absolutely thousands of years.
Yeah.
With what we had, we put it together and we figured out structure and we figured out how it would stay up without all of these regulations for a long, long time. And when things get really confusing, you should all go back to that.
Just
Try
remember.
and go back to that. Think about the simple structure and the simple way it would stay up.
Bureaucracy have taken the skill off us. Yeah.
But we have to remember to keep that skill. That is our skill, you know. We have to think about it logically. What will hold the next thing up all of the time?
They can never ride in the bush there. And we came and I chopped down the trees and we started down the trees with vines and bits of rope, and then you had a bit of trash with the vine.
Bit of vine.
Down all this thing and we threw it up on top there.
Oh my goodness.
The trees kept blowing through, so we found some tarps and we got some tarps around.
I don't know that that's quite what Sandra meant, Kimmy. That's maybe. Yeah, that's right. The back of a truck will do it. It is very Australian, I will give you that. And in the
that's recycling at its best.
Yeah. In an effort to manufacture and process and feed the masses, we've taken away the ability to grow our own food and build our own homes.
Yep.
Not good. Agreed.
Months ago, and I thought it it's really hit home to me. It was talking about, you know, if the disaster did happen and we really, you know, we had no cities and we had no power and we had none of those things, and there was an island, and only people who had a skill that was going to help the community could go on this island. Everyone else had to just stay with their masses who were going crazy. What skills would you have? You know, and I've thought about it ever since, and that's where you really want to trade. That's where you really want to know, or knowledge to know how to build from scratch, you know. And I've tried various since then to always think about, you know, how beneficial would I be? You know, they're not teaching them about the NCC code is not going to benefit them at that point in time. I'm going to need to know how to put bricks on top of each other and actually build a building.
Yeah. You're on the island.
Yes, you're on the island. If you've got a skill, you're on the island. If not, you're going to,
you're off.
live with the anarchy.
Yeah, no, just get it done. Yep, exactly. All right. So right at the top of the list, and it's not necessarily alphabetical and it's not necessarily in importance, but aesthetics is often a key reason why we might choose a particular construction system. So personal taste of the client to match existing construction systems. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to replicate the exact system, it just needs to look the same. You might want to be incorporating corporate colours, so there might be a brand that you want to apply to a particular project, and that will choose the aesthetic of the construction system. To match adjacent properties, which is more like what I was saying, so you can actually repeat or you can just match. Covenants, which is the design guidelines you see quite a lot in the new greenfields developments, where a range of specific colours are all you have to choose from for your walls and roof, and specific plantings for your garden, and the way the mailbox and the fence has to look, and the whole bit's very strict. And the streetscape, any advertising, or if you want to just make a statement. So it can be lots of parts of aesthetics, not just to look nice, if you like. Climate, obviously, is a key feature up here. So your construction system might respond to the amount of sunlight, rainfall, wind speeds, snow, temperature, mould, ultraviolet light, mosquitoes, vermin, salt-laden air, pollutants, cyclones, floods, dust, humidity, the plague, humanity, Hades. Sounds bad, doesn't it? It's a big list. We don't always get all those attributes in one place, so it's not too bad. But there's a lot of reasons to choose a particular construction system. What are you going to say, Nick?
All of them except snow.
Yeah, we get a lot except snow, you're right. Harsh climate, Sandra said yesterday, very harsh. The structure itself might determine the construction system we have to choose. So particularly wide open spaces, big spans, might require a particular structural system. The span, the design wind speed, imposed loads. Imposed loads are the weight that you and I make, or our furniture, or transport, or trucks, or cars. things that come onto a building or a structure that put work onto it and that are imposed. Site conditions, so we've talked about site conditions quite a bit, movable soil or non-movable soil. Heights, the bearing capacity of that soil, and the dead weight, so the actual weight of the building itself in comparison. So lots of parts of structure might determine what structural system you might specify. Logistics are a big one, so we've talked a lot already about some of the different manufactured products that are not available here locally, simply just not manufactured here and then too costly to import via road, train or plane transport. So manufacture, transport, legal load limits. The good example to that one is that a lot of the trucks that can transport pieces of steel around town might be limited to 12 metres. So you may not be able to specify a piece of steel longer than that, and you might have to bring it in parts and then connect it together on site. Now we have some slightly larger trucks these days, I predict, so it would just depend on the articulated loads that you could carry. But there are some limits to how big things are that you can bring into a site. The size of components, the terrain, so getting from one place to another. This is a bit of an extreme example, but if you want to move something particularly large that's prefabricated off-site, overhead power lines might be an issue, or turning around corners might be an issue. So there's height limitations to how high things can go, or craning things over other buildings, and we've talked about putting the pool in before you finish the house in the front so you don't have to crane the work over the back, and there's lots of, different logistics. Shipping capacity, restrictions, transport damage, mass, packing and distance. So transport damage is probably a good example of that would be if we were to try and bring clay bricks from interstate to use here locally, perhaps most of them might be broken by the time they get here because it's quite a long distance and those kinds of materials are not good for that kind of travel. The site itself, so any gradient, any slope, any cut and fill, the soil conditions, any existing vegetation. You do get clients who have trees or vegetation they'd like to retain, so that might mean a certain construction system to be able to work around that. The termite prevention that we need to put on the soil often kills a lot of the vegetation that we might want to keep, so we do have to be really, really careful. And the construction process can be quite damaging to local flora. Cycads and pandanus palms and things like that, they don't respond well to, paint runoff or concrete runoff or toxic chemicals that are a part of the construction process. So there is a bit of thought that has to go around that sort of stuff if you want to maintain a plant for the life of the construction system. Fences, access, driveways, zoning, planning issues, the extent of the site works and the adjacent properties. So there's lots of aspects that you might have that are specific to the site that might affect your choice of construction system. The time frame, so project budget, commercial viability, school terms, seasons being the weather, any major events, any holiday or seasonal shutdowns, and politics. So timeframes can be quite unusual. I talked yesterday a bit about precast concrete that can be manufactured off-site, and the curing time can be factored in quite well for the construction system, so it can happen at the same as perhaps site work is already being done, so that you don't waste any time on site with nothing to do while you wait for the concrete to cure. It can happen off-site. So short budgets commercially can often benefit from that time saving, because obviously if you are preparing a commercial premises, you want to be making money as fast as you can, and every day that you're not operating is money lost. So this is a way to get faster operation. Politics, so elections, local industries and bribery. Yeah, just make it right, exactly. Client instructions, so again, personal taste, corporate image, any financial pressure, money, cash flow and revenue. So unfortunately here, the cost of construction is a little higher than in a lot of other places. So sometimes the construction process is chosen based on cost. Now at a residential level, it's fairly similar for framed in comparison to block work. There might be a saving if you've got a builder that is particularly good at one of those types of construction. So if you have a construction system you'd prefer, you would go with a builder who's experienced in that system, so that they're not wasting time making mistakes, learning on the job or taking a long time. So if you want block work, you go to somebody who's confident with block work construction. If you want frame construction, you go to somebody who's confident with frame construction. But in the wash, it's generally about the same cost per square metre for either one of those. The variance in cost might be added extras like pools and fences and you know, line verandas or whatever, but it also might be the fixtures and fittings that you're choosing, not necessarily the square meterage. Internal square meterage costs more than external square meterage, so if you've got a client that needs to save money, then encouraging them to have more outdoor living suits the budget better, because you're not dealing with walls, you're mostly just dealing with roof and then columns. And with the climate that we've got that's so good, why not encourage further outdoor living instead of mostly indoor living? So you can get a bit of money back that way. Market forces, the rental income, sale price, investment, marketability and profit. So unfortunately we've seen a fairly large swing away from this more traditional elevated tropical Darwin construction to a more energy efficient slab on ground blockwork single story construction over the last 15 or 20 years. That's very driven by market forces. It's not just the NCC's fault, it's what clients are preferring. So that's why we have a streetscape that looks the way it does. We were talking the other day about how you can actually have developments where every single building is identical, completely exactly the same. Oh no, that's not even close to identical. So I did spend some time in the States and I drove across from one side to the other. It's the same for the whole country. Not just, you know, like you see developments, they're identical, but this whole gable pitch rectangular shape, that's pretty much the entire States. And so when I got back here, I left thinking everything looked the same. When I got back here, I was so impressed with the variation that I saw. So impressed. So we are miles ahead in comparison in variability. Every house is different, vastly different in comparison to what we could be. Cost, so the maintenance cost, the potential for expansion and extension, and capitalisation. I have had one client, they were a young couple, first home, looking to build a family, couldn't afford the entire house they wanted all in one go, so they designed something, we designed something that could be extended 5 years later, and then I went back 5 years later and did the extension for them. So it's quite a common occurrence, and you have to plan ahead for that. The shape and the roof and the way that can be extended is a part of the original project. And the skill level of the workforce. So I talked a little bit about picking builders that have comfort with the construction system that you are trying to use. But this is also about the skill level if perhaps you're in remote locations, or if you're dealing with unskilled labour, the quality of the tradespersons, if you're in different countries, third world countries, in the city, in a war zone, or under competitive characteristics. Legal issues like caveats, which is design covenants, like the design guidelines for, say, Bellarmac or Lyons or Zaccoli. Zoning, the BCA, the Health Act, or noxious industries. So if you're close by or you're within a zone, say you're designing in an industrial area and you're having to deal with competing industries next door to one another that might be influential. Security might be a choice that you need to consider with your construction system. So if it's the high likelihood of vandalism, burglary or malicious damage, or even just accidents or perhaps even animals, so not necessarily humans but perhaps vermin infestation. And the durability of it, so its ability to stay intact under different weather conditions, under its occupation and use, under accidental damage, under cyclical loading. So cyclical loading is wear and tear that's on a repeated basis. It might be traffic, like on a bridge or a road, that's cyclical, but it might also be wind, like a cyclone that has a literal cycle that it comes through. Repairs, strength, cleaning, and wear and tear. The longevity and durability and maintenance ability of your construction system is quite a significant choice about what you choose, so it's important to factor in. And the last one just says privacy. So we've already talked quite a bit about energy efficiency and thermal passive cooling. The trend is towards energy efficient design rather than passive cooling design, and because blocks are quite small and everybody's living quite close together these days, if you're inviting breezes in, then you're also inviting sound. Acoustics come with breeze just because that's how it works. So sometimes it can be a bit tricky to manage that in small proximity to other blocks. So privacy for line of sight and acoustics can be a factor with regards to construction issues, because a lot of our construction has poor acoustic properties and some of our construction has very good acoustic properties. It doesn't mean that you have to apply the same construction system in every wall in the house. You can chop and change depending on what you're choosing, but it's a little bit more complicated, and then obviously you pay a little bit more. So you have to weigh up. It's a balancing act, and you don't often have one issue in isolation. You might have 3 or 4 different issues that are competing or that you have to strategically choose around. So it can be quite tricky. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
Lisa, you mentioned that blockwork and metal framing inside is very similar in cost.
Roughly, yep.
So that's including the gyprock.
Yeah, so I'm talking about the finished product per square metre. Yeah. It doesn't vary a huge amount, no.
Oh, that's interesting.
It depends on the builder, it really does. So if you've got a builder who always does steel frame or timber frame, and then there's obviously, you know, refined their methods of construction like that, and their suppliers and the cost of the materials that they need. If you go to him and say, can you build me a blockwork home, it's probably going to look more expensive than comparable to another builder who does blockwork all the time.
But in comparison, because of the cyclone coating, the blockwork, because it's solid core, well, external, that'd have to be a lot stronger in the long run.
Nope. That absolutely would be the biggest myth out there. Yep. So we're just about to talk about chain of strength, and that's where the strength is. Now, its ability to take loading is a different thing, but when we're talking about the ability to stay intact during a cyclone, steel frame is absolutely just as good as blockwork.
Even with all that Rio?
Even with all the Rio, I promise you.
Yep.
But I don't want to build my house out of steel frame.
That's your choice. This is exactly where the client may make the choice of the material. If you're the client who says, I want blockwork, then that's what you want. Yep.
Come on. Absolutely. So we'll touch on that, and you'll be convinced and reassured. That's terrific. And the benefit is with recent engineering, when I say recent, the last 50 years, with recent engineering, we can know that. We don't have to go by instinct and just look at something that is heavy and assume that's safer. We can actually know whether something is adequate or not.
So all the talk I did yesterday about energy efficiency, can you see one real advantage of building steel frame over blockwork in terms of energy efficiency?
Yeah, the production cost light energy-wise?
No. What was that?
It's a lot less costing to make and the resources.
No, it's about the same.
The cavity. Cavity is the real advantage because you've now got a place to put the installation, whereas with single skin blockwork you don't. That's exactly it. So I've been working on commercial projects where we've gone to steel construction for that reason alone. We've looked at it in blockwork and then went, actually, if we build this in steel frame, we can insulate it because we already have a cavity. Whereas if we build with blockwork, we're going to have to create a cavity, and that's another whole skin on the building.
It just wouldn't be viable to do a double blockwork because of the cost.
You wouldn't do double blockwork, but you might batten off the blockwork to create a cavity. But then you've got another whole lining.
It's not weatherboard, but it's a veneer on the outside of the block.
That's exactly what you have to do. You have to come up with another material, either externally, like that, like another, a cladding, whatever kind of cladding you want to use, or internally you have to dry line, like using plasterboard.
In one of the rooms inside, they actually put the battens like you were talking about yesterday on the blockwork wall, and then done that, and it's dead in the room. You can't hear the room next door because it's like got dead in it.
I've just got another sheet of paper I want to show you, and I'm going to put it in the cloud, hopefully. Hopefully that just went there. Information required during the construction process. So we've talked quite a bit about the self-certifying or the certifying process for a compliant Class 1 and 10 project. And we've talked about that the drawings have to be drawn in accordance with the NCC and Australian standards and deemed to comply in the planning scheme. We go to all this trouble to draw compliant drawings. If the builder doesn't do it according to those drawings, we'll have wasted our time. And so the certifier checks at certain intervals to make sure that the construction is being executed according to the drawings that he's checked and certified that are compliant with all those rules. So we go to a bit of trouble to prepare them right in the first place. The certifier checks and stamps them. The engineers checked and stamped them. The termite management guy has done his bit. The plumber's done his bit. The electrician has done his bit. The glazier has done their bit. Everybody comes together to do a compliant job. And the certifier needs to make sure that everybody's doing the right job. He doesn't have to check the electrical work. He doesn't have to check the plumbing work. The self-certifying tradesmen do that and then declare that to be compliant at the end. Obviously, a certifier has seen a million buildings and he'll know if something's not quite right if he sees it, and he could probably flag it, but on the whole, we're looking at fairly quality work anyway. But these are the inspection times. So there's what's called a pre-pour inspection. So he's already got the land surveyor's certificate. He's making sure that it's being done on the right block. And we shouldn't laugh. Slabs have been poured on the wrong address. Projects have begun in the wrong place. So we can't say, oh, that would never happen. It has. So it's important, particularly where you've got a whole suburb of vacant land. It can be really challenging to identify the right lot. You know, people sometimes move pegs, and it's important to know where the boundaries are, and everything has to be exactly right. And getting the slab poured or getting the foundations dug in exactly the right place is crucial. So it's about making sure that everything is lined up exactly where it's supposed to be, and that the set out, so when I say set out, what I'm talking about is the first point where everything is measured from. If this is the site boundary, and this is your building, let's say, and this is going to be a slab-on-ground blockwork construction building, you have to start somewhere. So you would typically give the builder a set-out point, and this would have dimensions. And it might be equivalent to the setbacks, or it might be an arbitrary point, but there needs to be a place where it goes from, and then everything is dimensioned from there. So the certifier has to check and make sure that the set out and the distance from the boundaries is what it's supposed to be, and that any floor heights are working correctly as well. Then they also check the geotechnical report, any fill compaction test report. So if you've brought dirt in and it has to be compacted to achieve a site classification, they'll check that certification, and they'll also check the termite management certificate, particularly before you pour this. You have to spray the dirt to make sure that it kills any termites that are living under the slab in the first place. We'll go into it a bit more detail. There's quite a bit involved with getting this slab, this place done on the block. So we'll talk a bit about that. But once that's done and inspected, then you're looking at walls on top of that. So it might either be blockwork or framing, or a combination of both. So they're looking at making sure that you've got the damp-proof course underneath the slab to make sure that that moisture is not going to come up, or they're looking to make sure it's beneath the framing itself as well. And then you're looking at the different framing design and details, and making sure that your blockwork walling is constructed properly. They also check fire separation if that's required. So if that's a part of the drawing, they make sure that that's achieved. It might be through creating a wall that meets a certain fire rating level. So they have to make sure the construction is in place to achieve that FRL. And there might be an extent that that needs to go to. It might be a certain height or a certain width that it needs to achieve as well, or a certain proximity to the boundary or a distance from a window. So they make sure that those are in place as well. In the wet areas, they're checking the damp proofing. Remember, we talked about the weatherproofing and the waterproofing inside wet areas. They're looking at the extent of that to make sure that it meets the NCC requirement minimums. And then they have a final inspection. So they collect all the certificates that I was talking about. So the concreters, the termite guys, the glazing, the electrical, energy efficiency. It used to be a statutory declaration. Now it's either a certificate or a thermal assessor certificate of star rating. The plumbing certificates, any gas certificates if you've got reticulated gas, which we have more and more of these days, or if you've got a gas bottle and that's connected, and any weatherproofing as well. The builder's declaration at the end, you always get a certificate from, it's a statutory declaration from the builder to say that he built according to the plans. That comes with it as well. And then any other certificates as well. They'll check and make sure the drainage is graded and the finishing surfaces flow away from the building. We can't have the rain that we achieve here coming towards the buildings. That would be very bad for everybody involved. It brings dirt and microbes and in particular areas even diseases that can kill you. So if you haven't already heard of melioidosis, it's a bacteria that lives in the warm ground that we have particularly in the northern suburbs. So if you, like me at the moment, I have a cut in my thumb. If I was digging in the dirt here in Nightcliff or even sort of further afield these days, I'd be at risk of getting an infection from the soil, so I would have to wear gloves. And rain just brings that kind of stuff towards the building and you don't want that. So drainage has to go away according to the NCC and just as a good idea. Any corrosion protection that's required, so any cast-in steel, so steel that goes into concrete or goes into the ground needs to be protected from corrosion. Obviously you don't want the structural system of your building rusting and failing, so that gets protected. This bitumen paint, it's like a black tar-based bitumized paint that you put on the steel before the concrete touches it. And also to make sure that the water sheds away from it as well. So we'll talk a bit about that when we talk about footings. He gets the glazing certificates and make sure they're all installed as per AS 1170.2. So that's the wind design pressures. And then 2048, and there's the 1170.2 up there as well. So it's with regards to the wind forces that our glazing has to withstand to make sure they're installed. So we get certificates from the glaziers for that to show that that's the case. He also makes sure that what's on the drawings has actually been built in. And then he'll also check our access. So that's about the stairs, the goings and rises, and making sure the balustrading and everything is to the heights that it's expected to be, the minimum. 865 for stairs and 1 metre for all the balustrading above 1 metre off the ground. So they're checking all of that. I don't know that many of the certifiers actually have one of those 125 spheres, but they're looking at those gaps and making sure that it's not possible to fit a 125 millimetre sphere between the stair rises or between the balustrades. No, I don't. And it's not across every class. It does vary. Some classes have different gaps. But no, I don't. A while.
We go walking and our goes down a single thing.
It's compliant. Yeah. So it's sort of pre-Tracy. About 75, you reckon?
Or the 125?
Yeah. When did they bring it? Might have been in the 80s.
As long as I've been around.
Yeah. Oh, it probably wasn't required back then. Otherwise they would have had to have done it. But yeah, probably. Oh yeah? That's weird.
What, in balustrades on balconies, you mean? Yeah.
They're just not doing it.
Well, I think they're older, and those other suburbs you do see a lot of that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when it came in.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It'd be a good question to ask. They check to make sure if disabled car parking is required, that it's provided. They check and make sure that fire safety is provided where it's required. So you're looking at different hydrants and boosters and smoke alarms. They'll check in domestic the smoke alarm location and its operation. They'll make sure that all the service penetrations for fire-rated walls is all protected and fire stopped. If there's a lift, they'll check and make sure that everything's in accordance with the plans and specifications for the lift. It's the right size. It's got call buttons that work. They'll make sure that it's got the sign that says, in case of a fire, don't use it. Any exit and emergency lighting, and they're not alone in checking this as certifier. Once you get into the commercial sphere, the full-timers will know this, the fire certification will come by and do their own check. And that the wet areas are waterproofed and that the fire hazard properties are all taken care of with regards to the NCC. So there's a fair list of stuff that they have to check. Now just have a look in the cloud and see if my dragging and dropping that document in there was successful. I just popped it straight into the 4001 resources. So refresh your browser and see if it shows up. It's called Information Required During the Construction Process for Inspection to Pass. Despina's nodding, so it worked. Brilliant. I did drag and drop. I just, on the fly, I don't know who wants to think I am, but it worked. Miracle. So We don't have to go back. No, you're all right. Yeah, come on. What you doing, lady? I like your top, by the way. That's lovely. So that was very quick. It was truly just a refresher and just a way to start the day and a little bit of a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing. It isn't just because I said, hey, I think it just came out this morning. It wasn't left overnight. Yep. Unless it's warm, but I think it's okay. It's not there? Despina nodded. Is it there?
Yes.
Oh, it's there. Just you one. No amount of biscuits can get you what you want.
Under eye. It's under eye. Under eye things.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well that was...
Sorry, I'm very...
Did I file it in a weird place?
It's in that folder, it just starts with an eye for information. So it's just alphabetical.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought I'd put it in a weird folder called information. Lucky. All right. Now I have some fun for you. There is far less requirement in the qualification these days for manual drawing, manual sketching or manual drafting. But that doesn't mean it is not a handy skill to have. So I'm going to get you to do something. You can't see it either? Oh, did you break it? Just press the refresh button and to So what I'm going to get you to do, it's kind of one of those activities where you learn a couple of things. It's very meta of me. I want to encourage you to be able to sketch construction. It's important to be able to communicate with words and drawings, particularly with builders who have got complicated ideas in their heads and you need to get them into your head. But it's also helpful for you to be able to share what's in your head. Press the refresh button to refresh your browser and it should pop up. And it's in the shared folder from Sandra. And in 4001, just one click. It's okay. And it should be there. Yeah. No worries. So what I'd like you to do, and I'm not going to make you draw this freehand, what I'll encourage you to do is bring up your chain of strength diagram. So we're going to learn to sketch, actually trace, and we're going to learn about the chain of strength that Paul brought up. I've got some pencils here and some rulers if you'd like, and some sharpeners and erasers. So if you need utensils, pop your hand in the air and I'll come around. Artline pens are terrific for this. Contrast is excellent. Red and blue or red and black. When you're finished, pass it around to Andy. Thanks. But what I want you to do is get the image on the screen the way you'd like it, full screen. And what I want you to do is overlay, bring the screen that you're using close to you if you can. I apologise, it's probably tied down a little, so this might be a bit awkward. But I want you to overlay the piece of paper over the top. So the light from your actual computer screen will illuminate the image through the page. And then I want you to trace over the chain of strength diagram. Trace off the screen. So you put your piece of paper over it and copy what you see and recreate it. So that you've got the chain of strength diagram on a single page by itself. So it'll give you an introduction to sketching, and it will also give you an introduction to the chain of strength itself. Just to help you see what you're drawing, at the bottom here is a copy of an existing footing with an existing concrete column with reinforcing coming up through. Then what we call a bearer made of PFC steel, which is a parallel flange channel steel member going horizontal. It's connected. Then we've got the timber floor joist resting perpendicular to that, going the other direction. You can see the timber in section. These X's refer to timber in section. And then we've got the wall framing and flooring and the roof truss connected. These squiggles, for anybody that's not familiar, these squiggles show a break in construction where what would be between that is continuing the same. So it gives us an opportunity to truncate an image and make it a little less large without having to see the whole piece that's all the same in between. So similar to the column and the wall there, I've simply just truncated the drawing so that you don't have to have the whole thing. Chain of strength diagram. Just bring it up on the screen there. Just one click. Beautiful. That's it. Isn't it? I drew it myself. Pardon? Feel free to tilt the screen so you can rest the paper on it. Don't feel like you have to contort yourself too much. Yeah, you can adjust the brightness, whatever you like. So at the same time as you're tracing over the lines, notice what it's like to use the pencil or the pen. If you've got an outline pen, you might need to hold it quite upright to get a nice consistent line weight as you draw. If you're using a pencil, it actually, and this is quite advanced, it's actually helpful if you turn the pencil a little as you pull the line, as you draw the line. If you turn the pencil, it maintains the same sharpness as you draw, and you don't get a flat spot with your lead, and then the line doesn't get wider. That's quite advanced. I don't feel like you have to do that perfectly. What, again, are the main architectural scales that we use? Sorry? 1 to 100. 1 to 100. And what drawings typically do you see that scale for in residential and multi-residential? Floor plans, yep. What else? Elevations, yep. Yep, elevations. No, not sections. What else to 1 to 100 might we see? Think plan view. Site plans, no. Roof plan? Yeah, the roof plan. You might see that in at 1 to 100. Apologies if we haven't already covered that. And a reflected ceiling plan, which is the view of the ceiling but from underneath, looking up. So we call it a reflected ceiling plan. So it's as if it's reflected from the ground up. You'll see that at 1 to 100. Reflected ceiling plan. What other plan views can I think of? Electrical layout. Plumbing layout. There's lots of plan views in our drawings, isn't there? Oh, it's worse. Dear, oh dear. What is the world coming to? Yeah, you can't win. Plumbing layout, electrical layout. That's not a bad list. It's not exhaustive, but it's close. Absolutely. What's one of the other scales? Despina, you mentioned one? 1 to 500. 1 to 500. What might you use a 1 to 500 scale for? The site plan, yep. And David, you mentioned site plan, didn't you? What other scale might you use for your site plan, depending on how big the site is? Any suggestions? What other site plan scales might be useful?
1 to 1,000.
Yeah, 1 to 1,000. What if it's not quite as big as those? So 1 to 200 is a good place to start. That's about the lowest you'll ever get for a nice small block. Excellent. You can go higher. 1 to 5,000. But typically those kinds of sites aren't architectural, they're civil. So. Reflected ceiling plan. Yeah, reflected, as if you're looking up at it from underneath, this way. What other scales have we got? Thank you, Despina, that's excellent. 1 to 50. And what drawings might we show at 1 to 50? Nope, not details. Sections, yep. 1 to 20, yep. Details. And what other scales might we show details at? Pardon? Full scale 1 to 1? Oh goodness, no, probably not. 1 to 10. And 1 to 5, yeah. That's not bad. That's a pretty good list. Now you're not seeing any 250s, 450s, 375s. There are lots of other scales out there that other industries use that we don't in architectural technician drawings. So don't panic, they are out there and you will see them on your rulers. It doesn't mean that you should use them. And you do see them occasionally, people go rogue and try their own thing. Tend not to. Probably what you've determined is 1 to 100 is the most common scale. So if you were going to learn to sketch to scale, and the one time you're going to be sketching is perhaps with a client or a builder at 1 to 100, that would be the one that you would train to. I can imagine it would be just about impossible to be able to train to sketch to scale at multiple scales. I hadn't even thought of going there, but at 1 to 100 is probably a pretty good place to start. And I would probably start with an increment that is useful, and I would go with the 10 metre increment if I had to pick one, because it's sizable enough for you to be able to sketch out in multiples of 10. You've got maybe a 20 or a 30 metre long wall, or a 5 or an 8. You can do ratios and compare it to that. So 10 metres at 1 to 100 would probably be the place that I would start if I wanted to be able to sketch anything to scale. So on your ruler, and I've got this up on the screen as well, just in case you need some assistance, you should see at 1 to 100 the 10 mil increments all being an extra metre. So the first 10 millimetres is a metre at 1 to 100. So if you were reading a drawing and you put this ruler against a line that was 10 millimetres long, it would represent a metre in real life. It isn't actually that helpful, the red lines. Anyway. So what I want you to have a go at, to begin with, create a line on your scrap piece of paper, either flip it over or grab a new one. I want you to draw a line using a ruler that's 10 metres long at 1 to 100 and label it 10 metres at 1.100. And then underneath it, get in as comfortable a position as you can, but sketch that line a few times, as straight as you can, in the same length as you can. And like I said, use a dot to start and a dot to finish and have a place for your pencil to go if that helps. But draw it a few times until you feel like you've had a good go at it, and then maybe try and do it maybe with your eyes shut or on a different piece of paper. Just have a go at practicing sketching a 10 metre line at 1 to 100. It's a pretty handy skill. More paper? Absolutely. More paper here, Kizzy's got it. Stick your hand up if you need it. Yep, thanks Adriana. Excuse me.
How many times do I have to draw?